Hello, welcome to today's episode of Frivolous Gravitas, where we will be frivolously examining Chris's unique philosophical approach to life. He's taken on many of the teachings and lessons learned through the various philosophies of the Buddhist teachers, as well as certain aspects of Taoism, which we'll be discussing today. So without further ado, I introduce with much gravitas again, Chris Driver. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Pleasure to be here as always.
Yeah.
For today's discussion, I wanted to talk about Buddhism, but before we get started, I thought we should, as usual, define our terms. And in this instance, I wanted to talk about the philosophy of Buddhism specifically. Not to say that the religious aspect of Buddhism isn't important or valuable or, has teachable components to it, but mostly because I think, pragmatically speaking, Buddhism as the philosophy is just, it's more applicable to broader number of people. I mean, unless you're following the religion of Buddhism, which we'll get into, it's not really relevant to the discussion of the philosophy to understand the differences between the isms and religions of Buddhism. So to put that in more Western terms, or to whitewash it a bit to make it clear, it's sort of like talking about Catholicism and Apostolics and Protestants and Lutherans. Like, they're all Christians because they all follow Christ, and they all have their own scriptures and Bibles and teachings and rituals and things like that. And not to say that any one of them is better or worse than the other, or that they don't have things to teach, but the philosophy of Buddhism itself is separate from the religious practice of Buddhism. And I wanted to talk about the philosophy because that, to me, is what I follow, what I subscribe to. I don't subscribe to a religious aspect of Buddhism. I subscribe to the philosophy of Buddhism. So for lack of a better term, we'll call it ism, Buddhism, but it's the word of the Bodhisattva that we're really talking about, and the philosophy and teaching thereof.
How do you separate those two? Although, given that it's famously Taoism is separated into the philosophical Taoism, when you read and try and understand the Tao Te Ching, and then the religious Taoism, which involves ingesting poison and becoming immortal, which is easy to delineate because one is a great source of wisdom, the other is a great source of not being alive anymore. Whereas Buddhism, it's a little less cut and dry than that.
I think it's sort of akin to talking about the practice. So how you practice the philosophy is sort of the way we use the word religion, but religion is, generally speaking, requiring some aspect of faith to it. It has a belief system in it where you have to follow a teaching because you believe in it, not because you know it's true. But Buddhism as a philosophy is seeking truth no matter where you find it. So whether you find it in Islam or in Christianity, they both have Jesus in their scriptures, but there is a different focus and practice to it on both ends.
Right.
So to talk about Buddhism, like, I follow Taoist Buddhism, but I follow it, I consider myself like a principled fundamentalist of the Tao. I follow the Tao Te Ching as it's a guide for if you don't know where to go. But the path of Buddhism is 360 degrees of freedom. You can reach enlightenment in any number of ways. Any way that you can act or behave can get you to enlightenment eventually. Whether it's all good or all evil that you do, you can still get there because everything is one, everything is circular. So there is no direct path. But what the teachings of the isms are intending to do is for people who say, okay, I want to achieve enlightenment, just as a really simplistic way of putting it, what do I do now? All the different isms are just different ways of getting you started to start looking so that you can find the philosophy.
Mhm.
They're not the philosophy or the teaching in and of themselves. They are just the way. They are ways to the philosophy.
Right. So before, I would like to get back into this idea of the way or the Tao, or I'd like to quote someone later, but before we get to that, your idea that enlightenment is free, and not free as in like, you get it for free, but it's free as in you have the freedom to go and achieve it as an individual. But so this seems like a very what do you call it? Not all religions share this almost democratic approach to betterment.
Yeah, it sort of removes the ownership of it. So, like, a Buddhist could be Christian because Buddhism doesn't exclude Christianity from itself. But a
Right.
Christian can't be Buddhist because the Christian religion excludes Buddhism from itself. You
Right.
can't believe in the Buddhist teachings of reincarnation and also believe in an eternal soul that is one individual, unique thing.
Without
So
some
Buddhism is the
fantastic mental
open.
gymnastics.
Yeah, Buddhism sort of like the open, inclusive idea, the ideal of the supernatural, or what we would call supernatural, but what Buddhists would call the only natural. So everything else is subnatural.
Mhm.
Like the most natural condition for a human being is to be like curious, and thoughtful, and pensive, and loving, and angry, and violent, and
Human.
all of the things part of our nature, right?
Yeah.
The endeavor that we can impose our will and volition into the world, that component of it, and figuring out which way to point that energy and direction is entirely up to us to decide to do. It's things we can choose. And the choice of things is separate from the nature of things because we can choose to disobey our nature.
Right.
People can choose to suicide, but it's not natural to prematurely die intentionally.
Uh, maybe.
Well, maybe I'm saying simplistically, just the idea of what we're talking about is what I'm getting at.
Right. It's a
The fact that we can make choices and other things can't, like rocks can't choose, planets can't choose, water can't choose.
right. So
That is sort of what we would consider supernatural, but that's entirely natural for a stream of consciousness that everything derives from.
so for a while I've been working under a assumption. I don't really know. I don't really have any isms to attach to a lot of what I believe, or have come to uh, use as part of my personal philosophy. But I've been working under the assumption that all is natural. There is no supernatural, there is no subnatural, there is no meta-natural. It's just everything that is, and you act as an actor within everything that is, as part of it. There's nothing that you can do that isn't natural, because we are acting within this, um, I guess, totalizing construct that is universe. And we don't really have any evidence to support that there is anything other than the natural. But that doesn't mean that, just because, and if anything shows itself to be a supernatural actor within our lives, then that it also would exist as part of the natural world. Um, an ant is building an ant colony. We build cities. Uh, they don't seem natural, but they don't, because they don't look like trees. But at the same time, um, we're acting according to the rules of the world. Now, we still have choice, but within the natural world, we seem to be the only creatures within it that do have that choice, and we do need to somehow order our actions within what is. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, what you're describing is well, we used to have this idea in a number of religions that, you can attain a betterment, um, and a lot of these were based around less sophisticated understandings of what is this natural construct that we're living in. Now, ours is by no means complete, but we've eliminated the understanding that, okay, there's heaven, and there's the middle kingdom, or earth, or middle earth, or whatever you want to call it, and then there's hell and the other realms, or there's this other six-spoked wheel of creation and karma, and these don't really serve to explain it, but the things but a lot of the thought that went into thinking those up isn't, just because a lot of the metaphysical constructs have been invalidated, doesn't mean a lot of the wisdom that those constructs were built on is still invalidated. We still understood what it is to be human. We just didn't understand what we were human in. And a lot of that is geared towards, what was it? I had my notes. Nope, previous page. What the Buddhists would call the Magga, or the path of this eightfold path of right action. Well, which is only one of them: right speech, right resolve. But all of these are, you have to make the choice to speak properly, to act right, to have the right livelihood, to have the right effort, to have mindfulness and meditate, which we will get into. But and I'm also leaving out understanding and resolve. But those, even though, maybe a samsaric death and rebirth isn't the way the universe works, those things are still very important to us, because we still act with, as you said, volition in this universe. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. From that, I wanted to unpack a few things. So what I'm talking about with respect to nature and choice is the reason for Buddhism is our choice. That's sort of what I'm getting at. It's not that it's natural or unnatural, but the fact that when I say natural, it means that you could not do otherwise. Whereas yes, we can do otherwise, and that's the reason we need to think, and that's the purpose for Buddhism.
Right. So okay, I see
the dharmas and the chakras and the six-spoke wheel and like the noble truths and stuff, those are guides and directions for people who need some sort of symbols to attach the concepts to. The right concept of having volition itself is hard to grasp without physical tangible objects that we can think of and move around and place in our stage of the world. So to make that a little bit clearer, it's like an ant is very altruistic. It'll sacrifice itself to build a bridge so that other ants can cross it and transport food.
Right.
But an ant isn't altruistic because of its nature. It does that because that's what it does. It doesn't choose to do that. So even though it exhibits actions of altruism and signs and symbols of it, it is not the same thing as us choosing to believe one thing over another without proof or regard.
Right. And I think, would you agree that what you're getting at is that, and I kind of want to take it back to the democratic nature of it, is that within this choice, we have to find our own path. We can't, like the whole idea was that you sit down in front of the Buddha. Famously, in a book by Hermann Hesse, an enlightened man sits down in front of a Buddha. The titular character Siddhartha sits down in front of the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "Here's my wisdom," and the guy's like, "But that's not my wisdom." And so he goes off and he experiences life. And I can't recommend this book enough. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse was a great book, but essentially, spoilers, he finds enlightenment, but he finds that each individual's enlightenment has to be their own enlightenment. It can't be, the Buddha's enlightened because the Buddha found his enlightenment, and his follower, this lovable, almost sidekick type character is willing to prostrate himself before the Buddha and say, no, I'm not going to follow you. Either I'm going to follow you or I'm going to follow him, but I'm going to go follow the Buddha. I'll see you around later. And Siddhartha lets him go, being, he must follow his own path. But Siddhartha goes and finds his own path. And I feel like this resonated with me when I read it a lot, is that there isn't one path to enlightenment. There isn't even 6 paths to enlightenment. There are infinite paths to enlightenment within the strict boundaries of the way things are, because we all have to find our own truth, which is part of the natural truth, or the full truth, whatever truth you think. But we all tend to find the same answers, but the road can never be the same, is kind of what I'm getting at. But I think what you were getting at was that these scripts, this wisdom that was taken down by people who have taken the time to think about it and find their paths, are almost signposts. Try this, do this. Here's something that I did. Here's something that you can find your own truth. And a lot of them are geared towards not you learning, like, you go into class and you learn this thing. No, try this, experience that eureka moment of the flash of wisdom, and you'll find that it's not just from study, it's also from quiet contemplation. It's shower thoughts and traffic musings and watching the birds fly, as well as deep study that you get this from. And we all come to it in different paths at different rates and at different times, which is, sorry, go on.
Sorry. That's a really deep way of putting it too, because I think part of the way that we miss the mark when we're thinking about philosophy and philosophical treatises or inquiries of thought is the framing. Like, right from the onset, you're framing enlightenment as some goal to attain.
Yeah,
but that's a desire, and Buddhism is a freedom of desire. So as soon as you want to attain freedom of desire, that's recursive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you want to walk that road, but you don't ever want to get to the end, because there is no end. As soon as you think that you know where the end is or where you're going, you've gone off path. That's a red flag.
Can we talk about desire a bit? Because that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's fundamental to Buddhism, like the freedom from suffering and desire.
Right, because you see that in a lot.
The want to be free of desire is also a desire.
Right.
It is itself, and that's why Buddhism's usually taught as what it's not. Like the Tao Te Ching is famously just a big, long rant about what it isn't.
Yeah.
Which is what I love so much about it.
Yeah, I like assigning it and watching brains just kind of go. But you mentioned desire, because it's that catch-22 of Buddhism. It's like, I want nirvana. Oh, then you've already failed. It's like, argh. But a lot of because it is very natural for us as humans to desire things, and I find that when I point myself in a direction that is in line with, I guess, my own Tao, then I find the endeavor in itself invigorating, and I find the challenge very, I feel alive when I'm striving towards something that is almost seems right to desire. So I desire to start a family. I desire to, do what I'm good at to the best of its ability. But I don't believe personally that a destruction of desire in itself is a bad thing, although I would like to get into something, but I understand where it's coming from. A lot of these ancient religions, ancient philosophies did have this renunciation of the real in favor of a more abstract truth. You can see this in Christianity with monasticism to a very high degree. This is large similarities. You can see this in things like Jainism, in
I think that's exactly how they miss the mark, though, because all of those isms come out with that end goal. They say,
right.
follow us for this. The reason they're telling you that this is the way to be is because they have an idea, and as soon as you have that idea, it's wrong, because that's not what the Buddha taught. So instead of seeking enlightenment as some kind of end goal or like a place to be, like heaven or hell, like that's a Western framework that we like grew up with and it's ingrained in our heads.
Yeah.
The philosophy is more like recognizing that we all have moments of enlightenment all the time.
Yes.
It's about trying to maximize the number, like in economic terms, we're maximizing the potentiality of our enlightenmentness. So in our moments when we play with our kids, or when we make love to our wives, or when we share a meal with somebody, or when we show benevolence and, you know, offer donations to somebody, in moments of pure goodness or pure gratitude or pure appreciation or just pure contentedness, not for happiness, it's not for ecstasy or relief. That's why I find irony so funny, and most people do. Irony is like bad things happening. It's the negative thing from what you expected to be positive. That's what makes it silly or ridiculous. Or, you know, when an unexpected punchline comes out, that's what makes a joke funny. So inherent to our nature, part of our biology, we see and recognize moments of enlightenment, of lightheartedness as not a joy like we're jumping up and down, crying, and like, you know, yelling and screaming. But that's part of it. But it's finding that joy in the simplest of things, like looking at birds or grass grow.
Yeah, I usually personally will say something like, there's truth here. There's an element of truth, but that's, you know, that's just me talking. I don't think anyone else has used that particular phrase, because I got to that idea of there being kernels of truth, but you just kind of stumble across. And that when you find it, it brings you, you know, it's like, oh, there's something here I need to pay attention to. And it's in the random of places. You can find it in a sunset. You can find it in a book that you don't like. You can find it in a conversation at a bar.
Kids are the best for that.
Well, yeah, because they're encountering, and
they're just purely stupid. Like they're just delightfully stupid.
Yeah, but they're encountering for the first time, and they have that clash with reality that is refreshing to us. And well, that we do that with other people too, because if you're alone as a hermit in the woods, resigning yourself from society, which I am skeptical of, which is why I want to talk about desire. You resign yourself from society for some Christian or Platonic or the gods or whatever tell you it's right, but like this is the path to proper action. You aren't going to encounter those moments of truth as well. You're almost trying too hard in one direction, is my thought. But
it's
like you still
it's like trying to describe the flow of a river by telling a molecule of water what to do. Like it's not wrong of a drop of water to hit a rock and stop flowing temporarily, or to be absorbed into the sky and then rain down again. Like that doesn't make it less part of the river or more part of the river for flowing down the middle as fast as possible. It's all just part of one system.
Now,
and some of its system will spill over the edges, and some of it will. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it's a good metaphor, but it's but. If we bring it back to desire, to me, part of being human is to desire, and I don't see renunciation as a healthy thing to do when interacting with your, you know, your own truth. You're following your Tao. I see something as desire that you need to harness in a more of a stoic manner than in a some nirvanic sense.
So you're sort of tripping on the construct again. The construct is you must be free of desire. You must try to be free of desire. That's not the goal.
Right, and I don't.
The goal in a Buddhist meditation is to be free of desire. In order, when you're in the moment, ready to expand your mind and looking for some sort of influence from the world.
Yeah, my conception wasn't it wasn't a conceptual error, it was a scope error. I thought we were talking about like I have become no desire and in your being as itself, and I feel like that's impossible. But in the
That
moment,
can
yes.
happen. That can
Yeah.
happen though. From regular meditation and from practice meditate, it will spill over into the rest of your life so that like emergencies don't freak you out. You don't panic.
Yeah.
You're not afraid. You
So
can face the world with less self-consciousness and insecurity. You're
right.
not scared of being wrong or being seen as ugly, or all that vanity washes away, not because you're forcing it away by actively telling people how great you are as a person. It happens as a byproduct of self actualization, from realization, from discovery.
I'm pointing myself in this direction because this is where I go. Um, I do so, but if we go back to meditation, and I kind of gonna segue us into there,
Mhm.
that you, in the moment, you find the point where you don't desire. You're just kind of letting go of your mind. As it's well for me, that's kind of what it's been like. Everyone will do it differently. Everyone will approach this in different, but the purpose is the same. And I feel like everyone does need to find these moments of contemplation where you just kind of let yourself go. And you, it is a skill that you do have to practice.
But
But
on that same vein, we do it naturally too.
oh
Like
yeah,
everybody
shower
finds
thoughts.
a hobby. Everybody finds a hobby. Shower thoughts, gardening,
Yep,
cooking, cleaning, walking,
brings you
just doing your
to
job at work. When you're in that zone, what they call the flow,
yeah,
that's a state of enlightenment. That's
yes,
what Aristotle would say. You're affecting your, what do they call that? Let the flutes be played by the best flute players. The flute's essence, its purpose is to be played.
yes,
So as a
and
human being, when you're in the zone, when you're in the flow, or when you're doing human things that you would naturally do, those are moments of Zen.
yes,
And that's where Zen teaching is really useful, because it articulates that, whereas the Tao doesn't articulate that kind of focus as well. But the Mahayana tradition will articulate the grand scheme of life, and nature and seasonality, and so they all point at different aspects of Buddhism as a philosophy.
right. I did come to that actually from Taoism, from the Tao Te Ching,
Oh, did you?
personally. Yeah, because
Oh,
I read it and I was like, I wasn't thinking of like the individual koans or anything like that. I was looking at the specific idea of the way, which I thought was fascinating way back when. And I thought, okay, so you are in this world as a, active body, and I don't want to say body and bring this to Foucault, but you are a actor within the world, and you move around in it, and you are built in a certain way. There's certain things that Jordan can do that Chris can't do, uh, and if we were to be put in each other's chairs, we'd immediately be put in a position of chaos. When I've found and been constantly constructing a place of order around myself that I can act from in a purposeful manner along my Tao, and I have find that, and I have to refine it every once in a while. I have to reinterpret it every once in a while, find the path, because you're kind of walking through life with blinders on. And you have to, every once in a while you're going to hit a tree because there's so many things to see and do, and it just seemed like it was right, but that's not how you find truth. That's just life telling you there's something here to look at. um,
mhm.
so when I
And
looked
your
at it,
body chemistry, like shooting endorphins and dopamine and stuff like that, to
right, so
reassert its own.
I was interpreting my biology as, okay, this is how I'm interacting with the structure of the universe, and I'm doing it in a way at certain times which are, putting me in a state of, happiness, contentment, and other times when I'm not. And I was like, okay, so these times is the times where I am off my path, and these times are the times when I'm on my path, and these times are the times where I have to be taking a break and meditating to, chart my path, and I found my own ways to do that. A lot of times when I was living in Winnipeg, I would, just walk to the forks and just sit by the river and watch the water flow by. And that would just delete everything in my head for a minute or two. And eventually I would just get up. And it was useful. It grounded me. It didn't be like, oh, the power of the river showed me that I was insignificant. No, that's bullshit. Like what it did, that's self-aggrandizing nonsense. What it did was a little more subtle, because we are subtle creatures. It put me in such a place where I could ignore the things that were on my mind, ignore the things that I thought were important. And then when I came out, I knew the things had a new perspective on myself. And every once in a while, your brain would just go bing and be like, oh, that's what I need to do. And to some extent, dreaming does this. But I find that you have to actively do this. You can't just be like, oh, I do that in the car or I do that in the shower. No, you have to sit down and actively do it, because it's the metaphor I want to say is actually you're defragmenting your own disc. And
yeah, that's exactly what sleep does too. And prayer and meditation and just going for walks and exercising and eating, cooking, like all that stuff is part of the Buddhist philosophy.
And to me, you can't renounce you can't. Part of this is you can't even renounce your being as an animal. You have to embrace the animal. But
yeah, and that's why there are so many isms to it, though, because there is no one way for everybody. There is a path for everybody, and everybody's going to have something that they're better at, a way that they're better at conceptualizing the metaphysical realities of nature and space and time.
Right.
So time and sleep and consciousness are interwoven really tightly in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Not as part of a teaching or anything.
I personally would like more sleep, but
the reason I say that is because the way they teach meditation most often is by watching your breathing. And the reason that you do that is because your autonomic system will make you breathe whether you think of it or not. But it's one of those functions of your body that you can also force. You can force yourself to breathe or stop breathing as well. So by focusing on something that you can do manually, but which takes over on its own when you let it go, what it's trying to do is get you in that space between consciousness and subconsciousness. It's trying to cram your brain into a space where it can spread itself out.
Yeah.
And that spreading itself out is it's the word that we use, enlightenment. That's sort of what we're trying to get at. It's finding
there's a truth there.
Yeah, it's finding truth beneath truth. It's not like that this thing is true because we know it to be true. It's finding the existence of truth itself. It's the consciousness of all that is conscious.
Right, and a rower gets it
when they're rowing, seeing itself.
You get it. You've put yourself in positions to do this. You get it when I get it when I'm writing, or when I'm mulling over a new concept. I get it when I'm practicing at the range. I get it when I'm hiking.
And for me, it's with music and programming, totally different from you. But
programming is not my zen. It is not my zen.
But the neat thing about programming is you're encapsulating thoughts, basically, right?
Oh yeah,
You've got actions and thoughts, and then you can encapsulate one and package it up and stick it inside of itself and run it over and over again.
And I like it, but no, I'm not.
Oh, the result, I don't even finish most of my programming I just like to see if I can get a concept to work by manipulating the language in a way that I've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
It's like doing a puzzle. You're not going to win money for doing puzzles in your spare time, right? But you do puzzles because your brain likes it.
Right.
The reason it likes it is because of that. It's the Zen. That's what they're getting at. Tao, flow.
Right. And I believe
you're figuring things out from the inside.
So you mentioned just now you do it because your body likes it. I like that. And because we are our bodies, but we have to be honest with ourselves about our bodies. But at the same time, we can't just reason our way through every one of our problems, because we don't have the processing power to even run our own lives barely. So we have these tools that we seem to have. But I feel like meditation being one of these tools, we have to do it actively and not just, passively be like, oh, this is my little Zen place. It's like, okay, but why are you here? You need to almost meditate on your meditation so that you can know what you're doing, and you have to have that intention to find something better and be honest if you don't like the answer. And I feel like
I'm
a
not
lot
sure
of
that everybody's the same that way, though. I think some people can just be themselves. All like kids are really good with that. You don't have to teach a kid how to play a game. If you don't
Mhm.
teach them any games, they will make games up. They will just invent them.
Oh, I think adults do it too. I think we just place a lot of weird
A lot of
structures
us
on
do,
adults.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but it's different for everybody. But almost all kids will just play, just instinctively. If they see an ant, they'll watch it and chase it and poke it, and like they're just kids are
Yeah.
the purest form of Zen and Buddhism because they don't have any of the jaded attachments of the world around them or the baggage. They don't have concepts that they're constantly attaching meaning to. Like
Right.
when Westerners are trying to learn Buddhism, they immediately attach it to theism because it's the closest thing to metaphysical reality that they know of, that they can use to as a pivot, like a stepping stone to grasp the concepts that they're being, I don't
Well,
want to say taught, but exposed to.
I don't want to say that that was just Western thought that did that, because humans do have a tendency to create structures like organized religions around philosophical concepts. Some are harder than others, like Buddhism or Stoicism, but some are a lot easier than others, like something like the wisdom that's found in Christianity, which there is some there, and um, I feel like a lot of those structures end up missing the point. So you get a lot of you get a lot of orders that will be like, we just recite this one thing over and over and over and over again because this is how you do it. It's like, well, that might work for a couple of you, but you're not exactly letting you just say the same thing over. Oh, I said it this many times today, I'm so much closer to enlightenment. It's like,
But
no, you're
there
not.
are reasons they do that though, because the
Oh, there's
repetition, once it gets in your head, it becomes that autonomic thing. That's
right.
like your breathing, where you're trying to find that space between intentional volition and your autonomic system. So when you repeat something like a mantra over and over again in a meditation, you're trying to bore yourself to death.
Right.
You're
But I'm
trying to
not.
bore your mind into just like doing that activity that you're forcing it to do, and then leaving your mind free to do everything else because it's so easy for it.
Right, but I'm like
There's
in my
purpose to it,
normal
but
life. Like,
it's
maybe I'm lucky, but
well, that's the difference between us and most other people, though. Our ADD makes us meditate differently from other people.
well, yeah, and that's why I'm saying everyone's gonna approach their own enlightenment differently. And I feel like a lot of these structures that we build up around, I guess, heuristics of wisdom and the truths that we can't really express in words, which would be more useful to be put into something like art or music, are put into structures like, say, the Catholic Church or Confucianism or uh, fundamental Tibetan Buddhism. I said it, whatever.
But it's thanks to
Fight me.
those institutions are the reason that a lot of this information and knowledge was spread,
Right.
though. So
Now
it,
there
it
are,
served a function. It's just it's not the immediate function we wanted from it, right? So we're
right.
sort of placing our expectation and saying, well, the church has done so much wrong, like they've hoarded knowledge and books,
Not,
and they've oppressed people and they've molested children
well,
and
I
they've
don't really want
protected
to get into that. I'm thinking more
no, I
that
know, but
the
hear me out though.
individual. Oh, yeah,
Hear
okay.
me out. What I'm getting at is the end goal, despite what their intentions were and the actions they did, the nature of itself, the metaphysical thought process, the fact that we keep thinking about this stuff is thanks to the art and culture that surrounded the false versions of it that helped keep it alive to
Right.
today.
So
it's thanks to our faults
right,
that it
but
still persists.
my thought is that people will be more liable to settle with the aesthetic of the religion and the philosophy and the wisdom rather than the truth of it. So you really like, that monk life because you fall into the monk life, but you are just saying the words. Or more recently, we have, you go to your yoga class and you think you're enlightened because you do yoga instead of like using that as a tool to find something more about yourself. And so you settle for the aesthetic action and the rote actions of that. And that's what the structures are built around. Now you can use those to find the wisdom, but I think you're giving people a lot of credit.
No, I think you're putting an expectation on people that they have to go further than they go. They can go
Yes,
just as
I
short
will
and
always have
stop.
that expectation of people.
Yeah, and that's not wrong. That's like you being ambitious and idealistic about humanity. You want the best of everybody, and you want everyone's potential to be seen.
Yeah, I'm
But
classical liberal.
the nature of letting
Guilty.
things go and desire and intentionality is letting that go. Some people just won't go as far, and that's okay. Just like some drops of water don't reach the end of the waterfall. That's okay. They're still part of the river. They're
Right.
still there. They still contribute to the volume and the flow of water.
And in my notes, I want to actually say that even though I want people to try and not settle for, some non-substantive, what's the opposite of substance? My brain's not finding the word.
Inconsequential.
Yeah, something that is fun instead of useful, whereas useful can be fun. But that's not a life wasted. And I'm not in imprecating a lazy life. I'm not saying that was a wasted life. Although, because I don't want to say that, a monk studying a Christian faith in a monastery in Europe, spending most of his life at his discipline, didn't actually waste his life, even though I don't share his faith. Just as someone who tilled the earth and didn't care about any metaphysic or religion or politics or whatever, also didn't waste their life. They lived it the way that they did. And we can't really place anything on that. Although if you do harm, yes, you're wasting your life. And that's kind of where I come down on that. But if you choose what you choose, then more power to you. And that's kind of where I lie. So when I condemn and admonish people, I'm not saying that you can't just say nuts to you, but I'm saying try harder with your own life, please.
Consider the monk as a drop of water, being no less part of the river, even though they've splashed up on the side of the bank. The fact that there are monasteries and there are monks, like groups of them and many of them all over the world, are places that anybody else can go to if they're so inclined to find that deeper wisdom that they have to offer. So the fact that they exist, it's an option for people to study them. Whereas if these people all just went about being carpenters and plumbers and stuff, they would certainly make more out of their lives and they'd be very productive and probably just as fulfilled. But like we would lose culture. We would lose part of our humanity in that sense, because like part of humanity as a species is all of us, all of those weird things we do.
No, and that's why I'm saying a plumber can find, and I believe this is probably not at odds with your belief structure, as that a plumber can find his enlightenment in his plumbing. And that doesn't, just because someone's decided to be a carpenter or a horse racer, some park ranger, doesn't mean that you're not contributing to the culture. It's
Well, it's not being a monk though. There's not a monastery.
Right, you don't need a monastery is what I'm saying.
No, you don't need it. It's not about need though. There is no end goal. The point is just to be as varied and varied as we can be.
Right, find your
So if we're all plumbers, how much
proper.
variety is there?
Well, that's the
Not
thing.
to say there's anything wrong with plumbers, and
Well,
certain people will find their joy in plumbing.
well, that's why I was critical of the Catholic Church in the medieval society, is because you only have one truth, and it's prescribed down from the Pope. And good luck, having any.
Yeah, that to me is the problem with all religion. That's even a problem with institutional education, like we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, it's still useful in its structure because it's there to guide the greatest number of people from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, if you don't have an end goal in mind, if you don't have if you don't decide how the world should be, once you let that go, then you can just be content and astonished by the amazing things that already are. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the freedom of desire. It's the appreciation of what just is intrinsically to itself.
Now, one critique: what if you are chemically incapable of finding your center? You have a psychological condition leading to anxiety or some such, where you are almost physically incapable of attaining such a thing. Or
so how do you know they didn't find their center?
It's usually pretty obvious.
No, it's not. It's not at all obvious.
Okay,
you're assuming an end goal, and you're assuming that a center should look like this.
Okay.
But if a nervous wreck who's spastic and needs tons of drugs or whatever,
oh yes,
if
he
their
loves
center just looks
suffering.
weird to you.
No, I'm not saying. Okay, first, he's suffering, and they don't enjoy their suffering. So that's just a different way. I'm sorry, postmodernism doesn't go that far. I'm not going to call that a legitimate source of enlightenment. If
you're assuming to know what an enlightenment looks like.
Okay, yeah, this is just muddying the waters enough that I.
Well, it's not though, because that's the point of it. The point is that you have to stop. You have to stop accepting a truth that is untrue. You're accepting a truth that you know things to be, how people should be, and how they should act, and how they should look.
Well, I know that people should.
You have to shed that.
I'm very hesitant to shed the idea that we should help those that are suffering and that are feeling negative emotions that could, not emotions, but negative sensations, chronic negative sensations that can be alleviated. So someone with a leg wound is just, if they come into a hospital, and I'm not going to say, no, you're just living your truth and let them, have an infection. I'm not going to do that. That doesn't seem right to me.
Nor would it be right.
So.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Now, what about.
You mentioned someone's center. That's different from them having a broken leg. You can't push someone to a center if you're claiming you don't know where it is. And if you claim you do know where the center is, then you must be perfectly enlightened.
So then why are we having this conversation at all?
Because it's the discovery, it's the process. It's through the discussion that we each find those centers.
Right.
It's like having a hospital is really useful because most people who get sick can be treated in a hospital for the things that we know of. But there were hospitals for thousands of, or hundreds of years at least. I think the 800s or something they started. But they had hospitals where they didn't know how to treat people. The effort that they made to try did help people.
Now,
that was comforting to some people.
There is wisdom to be gained from from the more negative experiences that we have. And we wouldn't gain any experience or wisdom itself from without pain in itself. Otherwise, we would already be where we would need to be. But the basic tenets I'm working from is that there could exist a situation where someone, now there's pain and then there's discordant pain, where you, well, at least I know from my center, or my, when I'm walking along my path properly, which is something we've more defined, that if I'm experiencing certain amounts of pain, it's going to take me off of that path and stop me dead in my tracks.
That
And
assumes you know your path, though. Like, you keep adopting the same assumption. It's like yoga, for instance. Learning yoga poses is not in and of itself a necessity, a requirement of yoga. You don't actually have to learn that pose in that way with those fingertips pointed in that direction at this angle spread. Those are guides. The process of doing yoga wrong is still doing yoga. The process of praying is still meditation, and the process of meditating while you're exercising is no different.
Right.
So different people, some people meditate by exercising like full board. Like your brain loves it when you run and play soccer and stuff, right?
Right.
Mine loves that too. Another person's brain may love just sitting and petting a cat, and their life could just be to work a menial job because all they want to do is pay rent and pet their cat. There is nothing wrong with that.
No.
As soon as you take the goal, your end goal, your ideal human life aside, and brush aside like way of doing it properly, like you said before, it's a tool. These are all just, they're specific enough to tell you what to do, but they're tools like martial arts and yoga and all the exercises and the doctrines are just there as.
Now,
and that's what they mean by giving up desire. It's not about not wanting things and just being wrapped in a cloak and sitting on concrete and doing nothing and loving your pain. It's nothing to do with that. It's stop making a requirement of your happiness on that desire.
No, like I'm saying, my desire is a tool that I use, but I'm not talking about desire. I'm talking about, is this a, like.
So what you were saying though about somebody else who had like a mental condition or something, right? Something they can't fix that caused them tremendous suffering.
Right.
We're not saying that suffering is okay or that you shouldn't do anything about it, because that's not an enlightened perspective to do nothing about a problem.
Right.
That's what it means to put things into context.
Yes, but I think we're talking at cross purposes here. So what I was more getting at is that I think I'm coming at this from a very how do I put this? If that woman petting her cat has found her center and path by sitting there enjoying the company of her cat, and someone comes in and shoots the cat, what does she do? That's creating discord in her zen. Because like we can't talk about the good without talking about the bad, and I feel like a lot of these texts are only focusing on the good and not understanding the discord that exists.
Well, I could dig into that if you want to give me a minute to sort of unwrap it.
Yeah.
It might take a few. Okay. So from a physical perspective, the laws of the universe, fundamentally, as we know, E equals mc squared, right? Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared.
Yeah.
Like, period. So conservation of energy must not be violated. That just is. So if energy exists, and people want to talk about auras and reincarnation and how we're all pieces of life, there is a mathematical finite number of particles that were breathed in by Caesar that you are now breathing in over your lifetime. That's not wrong. No, that is very literally true, because the atmosphere recycles all of the gases in it.
No, I mean, like, theoretically at any moment I could be missing one or two.
No, but in your lifetime, I said, you'll
I know.
catch a few
Oh,
of them
yeah,
over your
of
lifetime.
course,
Yeah,
naturally.
and that's an average. Some people might get none, some people might get more. But the point of it is, water that's sitting in the Arctic, that's been there trapped in the ice for millennia, it's been there since it landed here. And before the Earth was formed, it was part of the sun, because all of, like, every atom bigger than carbon, well, even carbon was formed in supernovas, because, like, the compression of stars isn't enough to fuse carbon atoms together. They have to explode to get enough energy to create carbon atoms.
Right, because the core
So
is only enough to get to iron, I believe.
Yeah, because iron's too stable. It doesn't go any further than that, and then it compresses itself and explodes on the impact of all that force compressing down on the iron and being uncompressible.
Yeah, the star loses its
technically more
equilibrium.
compressible, but yeah. So the fact that we're all born of stars, as Carl Sagan said,
Star stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly in line with metaphysical teachings of all creeds.
Right.
It's agnostic to who the prophet was or when they were around or what they said. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. We are part of energy. You can convert your mass, your physical material that makes all of you, every boundary, even 100 kilometers around you, if you want to be really safe and say that it's completely totaling you. That's like using a limit to an extent, right? Because you might say, like, the hairs on my hand grow so far, and then there's the air around my hands, and then there's the molecules around the air around my hand, or what. Fine. Let's round up the size of the planet. There's no way that you're bigger than the planet. So we'll just say that's the limit of your corpuscular nature, right? Corporeal nature, yeah.
Crepuscular is nighttime or dusk.
Oh, well, Newton used it as atomic, but anyway.
Oh, okay. I thought you said crepuscular.
No,
but I think
corpuscular.
You corporeal.
Corporeal is what I wanted, because it's a large body. Corpuscle is a...
Oh, corpuscle. Okay, I see. I thought you said crepuscle, and I was like, no. Go on, sorry.
But the point is, there's a limit to how much your body extends out into the universe, and if you wrap that up, you can calculate how much energy you are physically out of mass. That includes all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, your past, your present, your future, because space-time is interwoven. Gravity is an effect that space-time creates as a warping. It's a manifestation of just dimensions of reality moving. And those dimensions of reality moving are all products of mass, and mass is a product of energy. Okay, so the reason why I'm drilling that down is to sort of get back to what our discussion here, the philosophy and nature of all things in existence is not reducible to any one focal point, because it's ever present, it's ubiquitous. And that's exactly how they describe God in all of religions.
Yeah.
So it's just a way of looking at things. It's not that it's right or wrong, and the teachings are definitely not meant to be taken literally. Well, they were maybe written to be taken literally because the person wanted them to be.
Take this literally.
The actual wisdom and knowledge from them, the wisdom and knowledge you get from those teachings isn't literal.
Right.
What's actually literal is that we are energy, all of us. It just is. That's just reality from physics. How we use and manipulate that energy is what we choose to do. There is no right or wrong with it, because the universe is still the universe.
Right. So one of the things I'm kind of getting out of this is that I'm kind of wanting to build off of what you just said here, is that we kind of take reality based on our senses. And because we only have our senses, we have to take reality as a summation of it. So yes, Carl Sagan says, again, going back to him, we say, okay, we're all made of star stuff. Yes. And that's kind of where I was coming from with my everything is nature thing there. because we're all star stuff. We can't subtract ourselves from everything. It makes no sense. But then he says, okay, but you have all this, these things that we've thought of, and these constructs of the way the universe works, and all this stuff that happens, and you get this. We have this construction of what he would have called a demon-haunted world in his book, Demon Haunted World, where he makes the point that reality, even with all of these metaphysical, things that we put around it, is still this fantastically interesting and magical place. And he doesn't use magic as anything that's outside reality, but he uses the word as the illicit reaction that we have when confronting something sublime. You stand in front of a mountain and you'll know what I'm talking about. Look at some of those Hubble image telescope images,
Yeah,
and
the
you'll know
deep
what I'm
field.
talking. Yeah, you'll know what I'm talking about. But we can't know every speck of sand on the beach, as in, say, a god or the god would. But we have to take it as a beach as a whole. We digest reality through our senses into a thing that we understand and we see partially, but we see it enough to exist in it. And we have to exist on its rules, on its terms, but the way that we can exist properly is to find that flow. And so kind of finding your groove. So I guess one thing I was talking about when I was thinking about discord was you imagine nature or the universe as as kind of a chorus, this vast instrumentality that's happening, and all of a sudden you're inside of it, and you can flow with it because you do have your own sound within that instrumentality, but you can find your best way to sing in accord with that. And I think that's a metaphor that kind of explains where I'm coming from with that. And you can you can definitely find discord with that. And we know and have seen lots of people who are having trouble and are definitely in discord. And how do you know? Well, they tell us. But then when we ourselves are encountering it, we definitely know when we are in accord, when we are in tune, when we are playing the same song that nature is playing, and we're going with it as ourself, as an individual within this unindividualized thing, which is the universe.
Sort of getting back, not to say that there's anything wrong with that. What I'm getting at, though, is that's one scope. That's one context. You're assuming that you know the song that nature is playing.
No, I'm not, actually. I assume that
you are, because you think that death is a bad thing. You think that cat being shot would be negative. Just because we're sad about it doesn't mean that it's actually the universe saying, like, it's negative.
I would rather not die.
We can be sad. Yeah, I know. That's part of our nature, though.
Right, but
our nature to want to procreate and subsist and to continue surviving. And while we survive, we might as well figure out all this other stuff on the side. But to say there's a proper way for nature is a contradiction of terms. Because not existing is just as natural as existing.
No, I'm saying not proper, but I'm saying it's doing its own thing regardless of what we do. And being part of it, we have to figure out who we are and do our own thing with regard to it.
But it's that injection of perspective that makes religion so dangerous. That's what makes people start controlling people by telling them what it's supposed to be like, what it should be, and what you should do with your life, and what is a good life, and what's the best for you, and what's your potential. And
which is why I'm saying that this is an individual thing. You have to approach it as an individual. And this is where meditation and finding your own Tao comes in.
But that's why art is so wonderful, is because art is about individual perspective. It's an expression that only one person can offer. One person creating that art.
And good art is something that one person can make that everyone can somehow understand. Everyone looks at it and goes, yeah, I get that.
Right, but the nature of the universe doesn't give doesn't give a damn about art.
No.
In the nature of the universe, it means something to us because we prescribe meaning to it, and it means something. It gives us feeling, and
Right.
it inspires us, and it does things positive to us. But that doesn't make it positive. It just means that it's there.
Yeah.
So Buddhism is about finding the things that are just there. It's not saying that you should never deal with things that you enjoy or like or don't like. It doesn't mean that you should be happy in pain. It means that you can find a space between pain and happiness that's separate from it.
Now, on that,
that's the
I
enlightenment.
come to actually where I kind of learned, I can't even remember the passage, but Plato specifically was talking about how, yes, we don't want to feel bad, but it's foolish to, I'm very paraphrasing here, it's very foolish to see happiness as the goal that you should attain, where it is from contentment that you can act towards happiness and towards unhappiness. That I think that idea was very useful, I found, in helping me. So the idea of contentment rather as the goal, finding your own baseline through the exploration of yourself.
I think that's what he was getting at, though. That was in the context of practicality. The entire purpose for that was to be practical.
That's Plato.
Purpose for,
I took it outside of what Plato probably wanted me to take it as, but you know.
No, that's what he was going for. That's how I interpreted it too. But that's also the reason that somebody might be motivated to follow Buddhism, like the philosophy. I mean,
and
it's not because they'll ever achieve it. It's not to achieve something though, and it's because it's practical and useful to people to find joy as much as it's there instead of overlooking it. Mm-hmm. That's the practical application of finding Buddhist Zen or the Tao. It's being able to accept things that you can't change more readily, so that you can move on and be as least affected by them as possible where you don't want them, and most affected as possible where you do want them.
Right. And I find that Buddhism itself it's just, how do I say this? It's something that wasn't just discovered by Buddha, because a lot of these things are mirrored in other places. Because if we were to take what you just said out of context, I would say that you've been reading Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, but
mostly Seneca.
Yeah. But that philosophy in itself has its drawbacks, just like any other one. We reach half truths more than we reach full truths. It's like, because it's like, oh, that sounds great. Suffer through, get through it, adopt a stoic attitude. Why? Well, because that's what the gods want. It's like, okay, wait, what? That doesn't quite work. So I guess this would be called the moment of, what did he call it? Greenblatt called it the swerve. The moment at which a philosophy or a construct starts to no longer be useful and starts making stuff up. It jumps the shark, essentially. You talk about forgiveness, and all of a sudden you can only be forgiven by Jesus. It's like, whoa, wait, no, we can forgive each other.
And therein lies the difference between a philosophy and a religion, though, getting back to what we were saying before. And the reason why we didn't want to talk about religion is because we want to acknowledge specifically that type of thinking is not just not useful, it's harmful.
Right. And I actually haven't been talking about religion most of this time. I don't know why you keep coming back to it.
I keep coming back to it because that's my focus. That's how I discovered it. I went to church 4 times a week when I grew up, and I was raised Christian, and I found Islam and Buddhism after all of my religious studies. So it's just my frame of reference, and most white people's frame of reference is coming from that angle.
I went to Sunday school, but then I didn't really
I could relate it to Brahmanism, but nobody would know what I'm talking about. The Brahman is the breath of all that is. It's the Tao, but it's before the Tao. Like, we could talk
Yeah.
about Brahmanism if you want, but it would mean nothing to the people listening. That's the problem.
Well, you gotta that whole idea of dharma would resonate with a lot of people, but then the structure of the caste system itself is an atrocity of social construction. But the dharma makes sense to me. This is what I'm meant to do. And when sorry, the metaphor is not coming out clear. The sculptor first gets his hand on clay and he goes, "Yeah, I get this. This makes sense to me." You find your dharma.
But that's sort of just one concept to help learn one thing.
Right.
That's what
so I
like,
never really.
So the other side of that would be the dukkha, the duqqha or something like
write
that.
Down, didn't I? Yes, the life is suffering.
Yes, but it's not just suffering, that's a bad translation. What it's actually saying is the things that are unknown and the things that cause pain are also considered part of suffering.
Yeah.
Like emotional pain, I mean.
Oh, yeah,
But it's sort of like, it's an extension of suffering that we just use as an English term to sort of surmise it. That's not exactly what it's talking about. It's not saying that things are intrinsically negative. It's saying that we have negative feelings towards things that happen.
Yeah,
Just like I was saying about
that's where I was coming from.
The universe is indifferent to whether or not there's life in it. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it good or bad. And it doesn't mean we can't make the most of it.
No,
and it doesn't mean that there are things that we enjoy and like, but it also doesn't mean that we can prescribe the universe to have positive things in it because we like them.
Yes. Now, I think a lot of what the confusion was is because I was kind of switching perspectives there. So from a objective universal perspective, no, it doesn't matter what our feelings are. From a personal perspective, there are definitely positives and negatives. But I know that those positives and negatives are defined by myself and my, what do you call them? Sensations. But they are like, yes, the objective reality doesn't care, but I'm not purely living in objective reality. I have to live as a human.
But the universal truths that you speak of, they live in objective reality. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Right. But to
find universal truths, you have to find that objective reality and analyze it separately from your own intuitions.
Oh, yeah.
Because your intuitions are fundamentally based on your nature.
But the other thing is that I can do is that I can take my intuitions and sensory, what do you call them? I can take those as signposts. So I can take it as evidence. I'm feeling bad about this. Why?
That's what the
feel good
dharmas
about that. Yeah, I feel good about this. Why? And I can ask myself, it's like, okay, this isn't neither good or bad, but what about this interaction is making me feel like this? And okay, this provides joy. How do I keep doing this with my life? Oh, I can go get a job and get paid. So
the Buddhist philosophy would be dissecting it to find out what part of that gave you joy and find that part in more things.
Yes,
rather than doing more of the one thing, it means finding that one thing and spreading it out.
Yeah. So like I understand that sometimes it's like, oh, why am I so angry? Why am I so angry? Oh, speaking like you could easily say something like, because of my lot in life, I could be blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, it's because you haven't had a drink of water in 6 hours. Drink some water. You didn't sleep good last night. Remove yourself from your conception and your like that's an imposition on reality of yourself. I'm suffering because I'm this class, or I'm this gender, or I'm this height, or I'm not strong as I should be, or something external to myself is keeping me from reaching my truth. It's like, no, you have to be honest that your suffering is just, well, it just is. And either you have to go, this too shall pass, or go to a doctor or something that you think might help. You have to
affect change.
Right. And that's honesty is the thing that allows you to do that, I believe, the most. And honesty is not easy, especially with honesty to yourself.
That's the hardest, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like knowing when you're lying to yourself is like pivotal in discovering like the Buddhist philosophy of how to live.
Yeah. I feel like I came to a lot of these on my own because I saw how honesty was affecting my life. When I was honest to myself, I ended up doing better than when I wasn't. But I think that it's a practice that came from an odd place in my life, which I'm not going to get into. But I was lucky.
I think that's typical. Everybody goes through that. Not the same things, but everybody has that self-discovery that they go through. They all have a different way, a different path, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, an athlete. Athletics is a good example because it takes the same rigorous discipline as a religion does, where you self-impose constraints and you follow the rules of the game and you strengthen yourself in certain specific ways to get good at it, right?
Yeah, I would often say
shooting a hockey puck around doesn't help you negotiate trade deals,
right,
or fiscal policy.
Well, a hockey player, hockey is their religion. That's it. Like, what religion are they? No, hockey is that person's religion. They can't do it.
What I'm getting at is that path is no less right than someone else's.
Yeah.
Somebody with family troubles or somebody with health issues, or it's just another way of self-discovery because it's through the process of rigorously subjecting yourself to an array of rituals, whatever you want to call them or decide them to be.
Discipline.
It's helping you find something indirectly, not by pointing at it and saying this is an example of what is right and true. It's by finding all variations of possibilities.
So now that kind of points to a necessity of effort on the part of this, which points to not the necessity of effort, which we can call the willy-nilly application of effort is often useless, which means that you need discipline. And in every faith, in every path, there is the necessity for discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that discipline is something that would be really neat to go into.
I think that's mainly the purpose of meditation, because it's hard to sit still for everybody. To sit and clear your mind is notoriously difficult to do. Like, right. I think that's why naturally we create arts. Like, that's why we've always done it, right? From the earliest sapiens, we've always had artistic expression. And language was one of the biggest things we learned, because that let us convey the thoughts that we had from these self-expressions. It let us articulate them to other people who didn't have the same experiences as we did, but so that they can still get some of it through language, through speech. Right. And when language is insufficient, you've got song. And when song is insufficient, you've got dance. And when dance is insufficient, you've got drawing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's not that there is a right way to go about finding out truth. Everybody can find it in the way that best suits their own processing, the way they gather from sensory perceptions in the world around them. So going into meditation and stuff, that's where you wanted to take that, right?
Well, we already talked a lot about meditation, and I don't really want to prescribe anything other than find some meditation thing that works for you. But I want to talk about discipline itself, because I find it's something that really, really made my life a lot more bearable. And it sucks. And that's kind of like it sucks, but is something that is inherent to discipline, which is a kind of a weird way of putting it now that I hear it out loud. But it's kind of that harder path, that one that you the one that if you want to move forward in life, which is kind of what we do as humans, we just kind of move from one moment to the next, in more ways than one, then you need discipline to engage yourself within that movement. And I think I'm putting that very vague, but
well, yeah, there's nuance and then there's nuage, right?
Yeah,
so it's cloud
yeah,
in French.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would say discipline is, it's our natural way of rationalizing things, because our brains are well adapted to learn reasoning, but reasoning isn't the first thing our brains learned how to do.
No.
You know what I mean?
Eat.
So we haven't reached the apex of evolution. We're still evolving. It's such a slow process. It looks static.
Yeah, and we're in this form now, but honest, while there's apex, we don't really know where it's going next. It could be anything.
Yeah, exactly. But this is what gets us to the apex. It's through philosophical intrigue that gets us there. It's not going to be through any other activity.
You're right, because
everything else is just how we subsist. It's how we eat and feed. We're just bioreactors. We convert energy and spend energy. That's all we do.
Right, because
we're entropy temporarily.
Well, so we kind of got into this before when I was saying, like, we have information, we have the ability to do, but how do we direct that action? And philosophy, which is kind of a meditation on, sorry, my brain's swimming around in circles. Philosophy, which is a tool that we can use to guide ourselves. And it's almost like philosophy isn't so much of a creed as a notebook that you kind of just fill up with your thoughts and see what's the right thing, and you fill it up through the use of active thought, meditation, and that guides your actions. So it's the famous.
And that's really where I wanted to take this conversation ultimately too, is talking about how philosophy applies to everyday life.
Right.
I think it behooves us to consider the fact that science was philosophy before it was science. Empirical study, empirical study, like the act of measuring and observing things, is science.
Right.
And you need the philosophy, but you need the philosophy of, like, I'm going to do this methodically. That's a philosophy. Before you can even have science, you need to identify it, and that's what philosophy is.
You gotta.
It's the guide. It's the posts. It's the monuments that like, not milestones, because milestones tell you how far you've gone. It's more like a monument that shows you where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, you can't have math unless you decide to start counting things. And if you decide to start counting things, you have to develop arithmetic, which has rules. Those rules are prescribed by logic and reasoning, which is done through philosophical introspective.
I disagree to an extent, as just because we didn't have a word for it doesn't mean we couldn't do it. And a lot of times,
well, without the word, the process would still be philosophical in nature, even if you didn't have the word philosophy.
Right. So you get people
still be doing philosophy.
Right. So the method of, like, people accidentally did the method of science. They used the scientific method accidentally all throughout history. Some guy making like 6,000 years ago was making fish hooks out of fish bones, going like, I'm going to try a whole bunch of different types of fish hooks and different types of bones. Maybe I can make a better fish hook. And he does it, and he sits there and he goes through the process, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, that guy, that's the fish hook guy. We but they didn't know how to take advantage of it very well, because they hadn't, we didn't have the structures of passing things on. We didn't have the knowledge processes that we do nowadays, where we just a simple thing as a book. that,
Yeah, that's
this,
high-tech technology right there.
right? And we do take these things for granted, and it's like, oh, it's just, an oppressive way of knowing. It's like, no, this is a way of moving information from one generation to the next,
In
because,
one brain to the other. Like, it's
right,
not like we're sending electrons from one to the other or connecting neurons or anything, right? You're
right,
just making perturbations in air, like, to make sound. And then your ear oscillates and interprets sound and recognizes like tone and cadence and intonation and nuance.
right.
Like it's absolutely astounding how much like mental faculties are required for just communicating.
Well,
So
usually when
before
I,
we had language to describe things like we're talking right now, like metaphysics couldn't be described in primitive languages. You had to
no,
have the discussion, even if it was about nothing. You had to have the discussion about fish to make up a story of fish being God.
yeah, well,
It's the process that evolved our language. It's not that we talked about the right things or did the right way or followed the right rules. The process of talking developed our language such that we could develop philosophical material to discuss.
right,
And it's not because they were told or focused or knew the path or knew where to go. It went where it went because of evolution.
right. And then 400 years ago,
Manifest
they
itself.
they looked at themselves, and we as a human, as a race, looked at ourselves, and we found something that worked, and we're like, whoa, what do we call this thing that we're doing?
Yeah. And
And
every
it's
time
like,
you need a new word to describe a really complex set of ideas,
yeah,
you can teach a word or write a word and put it in a book and explain it.
well, they called it
And now
natural
everybody
philosophy
can learn it.
for a couple hundred years, but then that was like, well, no, this doesn't really do the trick anymore. So we need to call it
So
science now.
I want to apply that thought in that context to discipline. The
Okay,
purpose
yeah,
of our discipline, what I'm conjecturing, and this is just my opinion, my philosophy, but in this case, what I'm saying is the discipline itself is like learning to speak philosophically when you had primitive language. There was no way for the primitive language to know where it was going to take those people because they couldn't think that far ahead. But
right,
as we evolved, just from practice, just from doing things and stretching the limits and bounds of our capacities as humans, that's what reaches enlightenment. That's what shows us the light.
right. And we kind of stumbled into things that worked, and then gave
Well,
them
yeah, like electronics.
names.
We had Boolean logic before we had transistors and logic gates, right? But we
Right. Well,
had Boolean logic first.
look at Babbage's engine there, which
Mm.
used a very similar thing, and they hadn't come up with digital for another 80 years. Uh,
Yeah, but it's from
it's another
stretching that by having
simplification, but
but by having like Venn diagrams of concepts that we just tug and pull and poke at.
right, new ways of
It's
looking at
not the
things.
end goal that we're trying to get at because nobody was trying to invent a microprocessor with 2 billion transistors in it. They were
Right,
just trying to push the boundaries of what they currently had available to them. And that's
because
sort of what philosophy is meant to do.
well,
It's the thing that drives us.
those people have the discipline to sit down and do the math. And I
Mm.
think what we're kind of getting to is that if you want to understand yourself better, you need to sit down and do your own math. But that
Exactly.
means meditation. That means what happens when you clear your mind? What images come up? And what happens when you're tired? Well, meditate then. What happens when you're keyed up? Try meditating then, and just find different ways of finding yourself. Look at yourself from
Yeah.
different angles, and do what
And it doesn't
works.
mean sitting in the lotus position and grounding yourself and memorizing all the dharmas and chakras.
No, and that's
It
why I
means
was
do
so
the thing
critical
that
of
gets you into
aesthetics.
that mental.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I was so
because
critical of
that's the
aesthetics.
superficial that you're. Yeah, that's
Right,
exactly right.
superficial. That's the word, because I do agree that it is different for everybody. Like a river helped with me. I would just go down
Mhm.
to the river, and that's what got me to that spot where I could hear myself, hear my gears, and see which ones needed oiling, and maybe which way I needed to go. Am I facing the right direction in my life, or is this right? Where do I need to push harder here, or do I need to slacken off there? A or B? And like these are the questions that you ask, but you're not going to answer them properly unless you sit down and with discipline give them the respect that those problems deserve. And it's not intuitive to just sit down and not think about the problem. Because
I think some parts of it is though. Like when everybody loves Lego, if you sit and play with Lego and you lose an hour of your life and you don't know where it went to, that's meditation.
We lost an hour of my life.
If you're like, chopping,
did you?
But I mean that's one thing I'd like to underscore too, is the fact that meditation isn't what it looks like. Meditation is things that we all do regularly and don't think about it.
Right.
Like you said, bathing, having a bath or bathing it's meditation, your self-care. All those things they teach you to treat depression and anxiety and stuff, that's all Buddhist philosophy. It may not be Buddhism that they're teaching, but it's Buddhist philosophy for sure.
Right.
Through and through.
And it doesn't really matter if we have different names for it, if we found a truth. But at the same time, I want to get into something that is happening in present society too. And this might be, is that we have something, there's that old truth, that old proverb, too much of a good thing. And you get a lot of people finding Zen moments in something like a video game and then not leaving their that.
I think that's more related to addiction than it is Zen.
Right. Now,
because you can find peace with drugs, but that's not useful.
I'm very dubious.
I mean, like heroin or something.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about medication, but.
No, but I'm very dubious about the use of, overuse of psychoactive substances to having some sort of ersatz enlightenment through substance.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't do drugs or play video games, but I'm saying it's not the same thing as meditation. Like you can play games and be meditating, but not all gaming is meditative.
No, and I feel like there's something which I kind of wrote down here, is that there is things that you have to avoid, false truths. So this feels right, I'm going to do it. Yeah, but no, it's actually discordant. It feels right, but it's harming you. You are on a path that you yourself would not enjoy. And we like these things, I'm making it sound all high and mighty, but like overuse of substances or some obvious ones, but maybe you just have a jerky attitude when you approach other people and you don't realize it, because this is the way you're supposed to do it. And that's why you do need that meditation to find that. I keep coming back to the idea of discord and discordance, but it's
a prevailing theme.
Yeah, I like it. I keep using it because it works in my head. But
you should though. It's part of the teaching, so it works.
Yeah, but I feel like that there are definitely false truths that a lot of us do fall into.
That's what philosophy does, though, is it breaks those apart. It stops taking all your assumptions for granted and says, okay, if love is a good thing, we should be able to dissect it, and it should still be a good thing after we dissect it.
Right.
It's about having ideas and criticizing all of them equally.
Yeah, and even if, it's like, what is love? And then we dissect it and we find, okay, it's not exactly what we thought it was at the first, but I can still say it's a good thing. Maybe it's
even better.
Yeah, okay, this is, now we know it's necessary, even though it's not.
That's what I discovered about love over my life, is one of the biggest things I learned was love multiplies. It never divides.
Yeah, and it's kind of infinite.
And it sounds simple. Like you have two kids, you don't think less of the first kid or the second kid, right? You just love two now. But that idea to me was,
I like this one because this one doesn't punch me in the balls every day. But no,
and that's the thing. You could like one kid more than the other, but it doesn't mean you love them more. Like that's a completely separate thing too. And it's stuff like that you figure out by criticizing your own preconceptions and your prejudices. Basically, they're prejudices.
And I think a lot of these things have a lot of names that we have nowadays, but because wisdom takes a lot of forms. But I feel like you do need to, and the discipline is the way that you avoid false truths. Oh, I'm playing video games 24 hours a day. Well, maybe, well, it feels right. It's just this feels right. It's like, okay, man, but watch out. Like, that's all I can say. But if it was me, I'd probably want to enforce myself with discipline to not do something like that. But at the same time, too much discipline. I need to force myself with discipline to not keep chugging along with work, or I need to take a break. I need to not just work myself to death. Well, I'm not tired. Well, no, you have insomnia. That doesn't mean you're not.
Yeah.
Just because you're not asleep doesn't mean you need to be like going.
And that's what true wisdom is. It's knowing that even though your body is telling you not to sleep, that you need sleep, and doing it anyway. Like,
right.
That's maturity. That comes with age. That's something you can't just teach people. But I mean, it doesn't just come because you get older either. It comes with age and practice. So practicing Buddhism is different from studying Buddhism.
Yes.
You can study Buddhism and know all about all the words and all the special methods and pictorials and rituals, but that's not learning the essence.
It's a good way to
learning the
teach
Sophia.
courses on Buddhism. It's a good way to get a teaching position at a university, but
yeah, and it's useful if you're trying to learn what Buddhism is, to know what other people are doing with it. That's perfectly valid information to learn, but it's not the same thing as practicing Buddhism. Or practicing a philosophy and knowing a philosophy are two different things.
Right.
I say knowing because knowing is like a bad word in English. At least in like Spanish and French or whatever, you have like connaître and savoir.
Yeah.
Or conoces and
you're aware,
sabo.
and you have there's one's awareness, another is a
familiarity.
Yeah.
Is the best word for it.
Yeah, I know
so
that.
Being familiar with a person, but you can know a number of things.
Yes. But like a lot of that recently has been made a lot more cloudy by certain things like epistemic criticism of knowledge itself. You can't know anything. It's like, yeah, obviously, but like I do know a few things.
Yeah, I don't know nothing. It has to be something.
Yeah.
What is it that you know? I don't know exactly, but it's something like this.
I feel like a lot of that is a trap. That's just an ambiguity that is placed on so that you can say whatever you want. Because if you don't know anything, then it's like, okay, no rules.
That really triggers me actually, because and I say that lightheartedly, not literally, but yoga. When yoga became a really big fad in the last 10, 20 years, as a practicing Buddhist, I found it really funny how people would do yoga and not do yoga. You know what I mean? Like they go to the classes and they do it like 3 times a week and know absolutely nothing about themselves through the process. But they've memorized the positions and the names of the positions.
Yeah.
Like
stretching
that's like
is important,
studying
but I can
philosophy.
do that at home.
Yeah. It's like studying philosophy and not knowing philosophy.
I think I remember hearing a bunch of like actual yogis who kind of roll their eyes at hot yoga classes and stuff like that. But
yeah, and they chuckle usually.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're
most Buddhists find it funny how people, it's like, oh, cute. Nice try, keep at it.
And one of the problems I have with that is that in the North America, at least, we do have this tendency to trivialize certain concepts to make them palatable. For instance, the idea of karma, as it's explained by Western New Age religious people,
like an elastic band that snaps you.
Yeah, but the thing is that it snaps you, in an indeterminate amount of time, whereas karma is originally understood to be an elastic band that snaps you in the next life. It builds up, and it does, and it's just kind of like you're filling a bucket of bucket, and then the bucket's given to you.
That's why I laugh. It's funny. They treat it like it snaps you like an elastic band, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it's asinine. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I must have done something good recently. It's like, oh, really? Maybe you should just try and do good things all the time and not care about whether or not it comes back to you.
Yeah, by that logic, Trump would be like a homeless person, and he's not.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not how the world works.
But then if you go from that, like it's also like perspective. So one man's karma is another man, like one man's good karma is another man's bad karma. So
But from a rock's perspective, any experience of life, any experience of joy and happiness is better than, or not better, but more than it would have experienced otherwise.
yeah, which is
So even
why
the
I
worst human life is more fulfilling or rewarding than the richest rock life.
right, which is why we should be grateful to have it and use it wisely and find better ways to use it as wisely as possible, because this is
And
some
just
weird
stop
stuff
expecting the universe to do what we want it to do. Like, a lot of people just act like they can use their mind and impose their will on the universe by like positive thinking, and it's just it's not how physics works.
Yeah, like there was that movie that came out a decade or so ago, like What the Bleep
The
Do We
Secret
Know?
or something,
Well,
right?
The Secret was especially heinous at that. Um, uh, but everyone that's successful in life has known this, and you don't know this because you're not successful. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know. I
Yeah.
guess I was headed to the gutter. But
Yeah. It's a pyramid scheme of thought, is all it is.
yeah, and you get like, what the bleep do we know? Like, look, we put happy words on water and we put negative words on water, and then we froze them and looked at their crystals, and look how angry these water crystals are. It's like, no, that's
Okay, what I want to go into that though, because what the bleep do we know? I thought was like life changing to me,
I
not
saw
because
it.
of the not because of the answers it provided, but it like made mainstream of philosophy of irreducible complexity of organisms, like the thought of breaking things down to like it's deductive reasoning to life and consciousness. So it's not the fact that they got it right or wrong. I love the fact that they talked about it,
Yeah.
like that they were looking and poking and prodding and seeing what came out of it. Like Waking Life, have you ever seen that?
Um, hold on. Making Life. No, I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, that's a mind bender. And it's not because of a story or anything, it's just a bunch of random ramblings. Some dude walking around talking. I mean, I don't want to give away the.
No, but like that's to me, you can find that in literature. Like some
Oh,
guys
it's
writing,
everywhere.
and that's what I didn't like about The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know, is that they take those things that people are actually doing, people more effectively, like Carl Sagan, for example, to bring him up again, is that you have this person who's examining the universe and not ignoring how we fit into that universe, and the these shallow attempts uh, miss the mark, and they make it seem like, no, don't worry, all you have to do is this simple thing, and they're, to me, it's charlatanry when it requires discipline, and those who are actually doing good jobs of it are definitely showing discipline um, to do it, because science takes discipline, and science is definitely a meditation. To
Hmm.
sit there and prepare 300 vials and then
And
wait 3 weeks.
painstakingly citate
Yeah,
or cite
painstaking
references.
setting
Yeah.
up laboratories and experiments. These are not easy things to do, and they take careful planning. They take intricate work and dedication on a level that was almost monastic. Uh, and I've heard from multiple people that have done scientific, like science. There are people that do science in my family that the that uh, there is an element of personal meaning that they get out of it, and it's not just a job. Um, and I feel like that's a truth that they've come to, irrespective of someone telling, like, it's okay, all you have to do is this one thing. But there isn't just one thing that you need to learn, and there's not just one thing you need to know.
Hmm.
There's a it's an approach. You need to
Mm-hmm.
approach life, not here's the rules I need to know. And you
Yeah,
get
and
a
it
lot
doesn't
of,
matter which way you approach it. You just need to approach it some way.
right,
Life is all around you. You just have to step.
right. And, walk forward. And doesn't matter if you stumble. One of the things that you learn is, make a decision. Is it a good decision? I don't know. You made a decision. That's all you needed to do. And that's and
See, in
that's
the
an honest.
Buddhist philosophy,
Yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry,
I
I
was
think
going
I
to
was.
say the Buddhist philosophy, just in line with what you were saying there, would be like stepping forward is another Western tradition of getting to somewhere. And a Buddhist would say stepping anywhere.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's still progress
Well, to
because
me,
you're
stepping
exploring the
forward.
world around you.
To me,
So
stepping
I
forward
understand.
is taking that first step. I don't know where
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
going.
metaphor.
I'm going to
Yeah.
start going that direction, but I don't know where I'm going after that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. I need to know that, put this foot here. And that's because that foot's the hardest foot. And the second foot's a little easier. And then the third foot's
Yeah.
even easier. You got a bit more momentum. And now you're going this way. It's like, oh, I should have gone that way. No, ignore that way right now. Just go this way. You got a good momentum. Because every path.
And then you can trip and you can roll to the side and then you can fall backwards and you can stumble over. Like it doesn't just move. That's all you got to do. But I think that's what's often overlooked with philosophy is people look for this practical thing that it does for you. They look for the answers out of philosophy and they ignore the fact that the process of philosophy is what got us everything we enjoy today.
Yes.
It's the reason we can enjoy pleasure around us even though there's so much pain and hardship.
Right.
It's not because we followed Buddhism, it's because we have philosophy just inherent to our nature.
Right. And philosophy is not just
without
Aristotle
harnessing
or
it.
Plato. It's also, he's like, philosophy is like, well, who do I follow? It's like, follow them all.
Yeah. But it's like your family values,
Yeah.
like looking after your parents when they're elderly and looking after your kids when they're young. It's things we do naturally that's just philosophically relevant that we take for granted because it's part of our nature. But when you cultivate it, when you curate, nurture it, and like that's what meditation and discipline and exercise and food and like studying, all these things that we're talking about do for you. It widens the scope of your potential for fulfillment in life. That's what it does for you.
I think this is a good place to start winding
Cap
it
her
down.
off.
Yeah. One last thing I probably want to say to anyone that's still viewing is that don't sell yourself short either. Just because you think you know philosophy is for highfalutin, like, doesn't matter. Give it a try. Go try something. Go read something. Your engagement.
If you're illiterate, just listen to it.
Your engagement itself is better than anything else. So engage. It doesn't matter how you think, and don't just engage in one direction. So I think that's my final thought.
My final thought would be everything that we know and love that we can say that we know, everything that the smartest genius knows was something that was developed and prescribed by a philosopher first. You had to first come up with a hypothesis or a conjecture and a way of looking at it and observing it and a study and a reason for doing it. Everything that can be known and is known by even the biggest genius out there, their words and teachings are just shortcuts so that you don't have to take the long route, but you can take the long route if you choose to.
Would you include artists in that, in philosophers?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah.
Because all of art to me is just an expression, and philosophy is the discovery of expression. So I'd encapsulate even rituals like singing hymns, memorizing passages of the Bible, if that's your thing, have at her. But just don't take that literally. Like, you don't have to say because Revelation was written that it absolutely must be true that angels are going to run down on earth and start slaughtering people with swords. Like,
or even don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, Buddha's always laughing.
Yeah,
there's a reason. Got a smile on his face. There's a reason for it. It's because irony and misery is funny.
I think I actually do have my Buddha right here. This little red guy is my Buddha. I do have one up there.
So. I make a point to laugh at all my misery.
Oh, it's hilarious.
It's got to be there.
I got hit I got a scar here recently about a year ago, and I was laughing all the way to the hospital, joking with going up to the nurse, going, "Guess what happened to me?" Because it's hilarious.
Yeah, I used to joke, like, even in the operating room right before they put you under, I joke with the nurses, keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to hear any ticking after you. You better have that watch on when I wake up.
Yeah, don't lose your watch, Dr. Nick.
So I think that's a good place to.
It doesn't mean you gotta laugh at dead people. It just means that you can't be mad
Still
when
respect.
other people laugh at dead people.
Or laugh at you.
Or laugh at you, yeah. Like, who cares if they think you're funny or funny looking or, weird, or
Yeah.
if you can't study and you're dumb, that doesn't mean you're less of a person. Dumb people are still people. Like, it's okay to be dumb. I'm dumb. Like, not every way possible, but there's no right way to be human. So
No.
when Buddhism's all about shedding that desire of having that end goal, and if you'll be a lot less hard on yourself for failures and take them more positively if you can realize that it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
cool. Well, thank you much for engaging.
Yeah.
Always appreciate your perspective and.
Yeah, this was fun.
Patience.
Thank you everybody for watching and getting to this point. I'll see you next time.
Next episode. Hold on. Next episode. What's your thoughts for subject coming up?
Purpose of.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
Yeah. I've been wanting to talk about the uses and purpose of history, and how it's kind of this thing that we can't really lose, and how history itself is, as a profession, kind of going about its thing. I wouldn't mind putting something together on that. You also did mention a teleological look at society, which would be interesting, although that would be fun. But I think
I'd love to do one on market systems.
Yeah, that would be a you-centric episode. Also, Megan's still in December probably will do a episode on opiates, where I will MC because I don't know very much about them, but Chris will interrogate.
Me lovey me drug.
Yeah. So
Mas drogas.
So we'll see next week once we get this up. So
up in the air.
Yep. We'll see you guys around the corner.
Frivolous Gravitas.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.